last 4 or 5 years, I've been involved with a couple of institutes, and we've written a few books that I think you'd be interested in. And I wanted to explain what the books are, and I brought some copies here as well, and they'll be available for you to purchase the next couple of days, inshallah, until the end of Ashura. So one of the books is, well, let me explain a little bit about the Institute. There's a non-profit that I started when I first came back from Qom in 2007 called the Islamic Text Institute. It's an organization with myself, 3 scholars in Iran, and a few other scholars here in America. Our work is to take primary sources, right? So books of hadith, books of dua, and eventually the Quran itself, and write commentary on them, and then translate them into English. So the projects that we've accomplished so far, we wrote a commentary on Dua al-Nudba several years ago. It was published in 2007 or 8. So I have that translation and commentary on Dua al-Nudba. There's a CD that also accompanies it with some audio recordings. So that's one book. And this, inshallah, you'll get a chance to thumb through it. So there's one time you just have a translation. First of all, the translation is outstanding. But then the commentary is also there to to tell you the story behind it, to explain what the dua itself means, references that are made in Dua al-Nudba to different historical events. We've researched those and explained those as well. So it's the ones who have read it and seen this book, they've realized that it kind of brings to life a dua that for many people is not known very well, and it's served to kind of make this dua better known in our community. The second and third books, there's one of our primary sources, our collections of hadith, is known as Al-Kafi. Al-Kafi is a collection by Sheikh Abu Ja'far Muhammad ibn Ya'qub al-Kulaini. It's one of the earliest collections of hadith that we have, and we have been systematically researching this, translating it, writing commentary on it. The first 2 books of Al-Kafi are now published. The first one is the Book of Intellect and Foolishness, and the second one is the Book of Knowledge and its Virtues. And so those 2 are both available as well. The fourth book is one that I've written. So these were written as a team effort with various scholars and myself. The fourth book is a book that I authored myself, and it's just been published a few weeks ago. It's called God's Emissaries, Adam to Jesus. This is a book that goes through, and it's kind of the most kind of a comprehensive book on the stories of all the prophets that we have to date, in any language. Right? So there's nothing like this written in Farsi or Arabic or Urdu, any other language, of this caliber, of this kind of in this style. It reads like a novel. It brings together all of the hadith that we have on the prophets, all the verses of the Quran, biblical verses, and puts the whole story together in a way that fits with our theology, with our understanding of who the prophets are, and presents them the way they should be presented. Yeah, so these books will be available, inshallah, afterwards in the foyer. Those who are interested, can I have a show of hands if you are in general interested in at least one of the books that you've seen, so I have an idea? Okay. All right, great. So inshallah, we'll find some logistical way to do it there. I brought a couple of boxes with these books on the order of about 10 to 20 copies. So inshallah, you'll be able to purchase those afterwards from one of the brothers. Recite with salawat, please.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil faraj. محمد وآل بيت محمد صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. The last few days we've been speaking about decision-making from an Islamic perspective. Is the sound coming clear there, or is there an echo? It's okay for everyone? Okay. We've been speaking about decision making from an Islamic perspective. We spoke, I'll recap very briefly what we've talked about so far. We started out speaking about free will, to understand the faculty that we have that allows us to make choices. Then we spoke about the requisite that we must have knowledge of the goals of life and the knowledge of the laws that Allah has laid down. And with those two bodies of knowledge, we can now make sound decisions. Yesterday we spoke about one of the ways that we can gain knowledge, increase our knowledge, and increase our experience with the world, and that was through consultation, through shura, through mashwara, consulting with people who have expertise, people who are God-fearing, people who have our best interests in mind, and all the different qualifications that we talked about yesterday, so that we can benefit from their experiences with life and then make better decisions based on that knowledge and experience that they share with us. Today I want to speak about one last aspect of decision-making in general. And this is a thing called Istikhārah. Right? So Istikhārah is one of the ways, one of the tools that we have by which we can make decisions. It's important that we understand exactly what Istikhārah is, because there's a misconception amongst people, and we think of Istikhārah in one way, and that's not necessarily accurate. It's not exactly what we should be thinking about when we do Istikhārah. So I want to explain what Istikhārah is. I'm going to share a lot of ahadith with you that explain the ways that the Prophet and the Imams have used it and admonished their companions to use Istikhārah in order to make the best decisions possible. So when you think of Istikhārah, in Arabs nowadays they call it khira, which is wrong. It should be khiyara. But oftentimes in modern Arabic dialects, they say things incorrectly. So khiyara literally means to make a choice. Istikhara, it means to seek khair. Right? Literally it's talabul khair, to seek khair, goodness, to seek the best. So istikhara is used in two different meanings in our ahadith and also in our Islamic sources. One meaning of Istikhara is like I just mentioned, to seek the best from Allah. It's a kind of dua, a kind of supplication, a kind of petition to Allah to ask Him to facilitate things for us, to bring our affairs together in such a way that the result is the best for us. Right? Talabul khair, seeking the best, Istikhara. In this meaning of Istikhara, right, this is a practice, this is something that we should be constantly doing. Right, when you think of, let me jump ahead a little bit to the second kind of Istikhara. The second kind of Istikhara is what you probably have thought of in the past if you just kind of had a knowledge that you picked up from societal use of the word Istikhara. Right, what do you think of when you think of Istikhara? You use the Quran or use something to make a decision. A subha, some people call it tasbih, but it's actually a subha. So the prayer beads or drawing lots. Right, so these kinds of things, that's what people usually think of as Istikhara, and that's there. We have some ahadith that talk about that kind of decision making as well. That, however, is a last resort when all else fails. Whereas this, the meaning I just explained, seeking the best from Allah, making dua to Him to guide you to the best and help you to make the best decision, this should be the very first thing we do, and a constant thing we do. Really on a perpetual basis, because we're constantly making choices. Right? Every day we're making choices, whether we realize they're choices or not, we're making choices. But sometimes we have those major choices. Right? We're making major decisions that are critical. Those especially, we should be doing Istikhara constantly. In this sense that we're asking Allah to guide us to the best. Alright, let me share some ahadith with you, and these will give us a sense of what is meant by Istikhara in this sense as seeking the best from Allah, and how much emphasis has been put on it. The first hadith is from Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. It's narrated in Al-Kafi, إِذَا أَرَادَ أَحَدُكُمْ أَمْرًا فَلَا يُشَاوِرْ فِيهِ أَحَدًا مِنَ النَّاسِ حَتَّى يَبْدَأَ فَيُشَاوِرَ اللَّهَ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى. He says, whenever you are on the the brink of making some important decision, don't consult a single person until you first consult Allah Almighty. Don't consult a single person until you consult Allah Almighty. So this immediately kind of fits together with what we talked about yesterday. Consultation. He uses the same word mushawara that we talked about yesterday. Yesterday we just talked about how important mushawara is. As soon as you want to make a decision, consult with people. Gather information, gather their experiences before you make a good decision. Here he's saying, well, hold on a second. Before you even do mushawara with people, there's something else you should do. Do mushawara with Allah. Consult with Allah. How does that work? Anyone have a private line to God? Right? We don't have. It's not going to happen through conversation. It's going to be a one-way conversation. If it is, and that's not very helpful because we want Him to tell us what to do. So what is the Imam talking about when he says consult with Allah before you consult with anyone? قُلْتُ وَمَا مُشَاوَرَةُ اللَّهِ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى. The companion who's listening to this, he says, what are you talking about? What is this mushawara that we have with Allah? How do we consult with Allah on an issue? قَالَ يَبْدَأُ فَيَسْتَخِيرُ اللَّهَ فِيهِ أَوَّلًا. And he says, to start with, you'll make the dua. Remember this phrase, it's a very simple phrase. أَسْتَخِيرُ اللَّهَ بِرَحْمَتِهِ. أَسْتَخِيرُ اللَّهَ بِرَحْمَتِهِ. Literally it means I seek the best from Allah by His mercy. So through God's mercy, I seek the best. I seek the best results, I seek the best kind of end to my affairs. أَسْتَخِيرُ اللَّهَ بِرَحْمَتِهِ. So say this dua, and we'll learn some of the different recommendations for when to say it and how many times to say it and those kinds of things. But here he's just saying the basic instruction. So seek the best from Allah, أولا. ثم يشاور فيه فإنه إذا بدأ بالله تبارك وتعالى أجرى له الخيرة على لسان من يشاء من الخلق. So the way you start by consulting Allah is ask Allah for the best. Our dua to Him is taking consultation from Him. The answer doesn't come though directly from Allah because unfortunately the reality is none of us hears Allah's words directly. How will Allah speak to us? He says that because you asked Allah to begin with before you made any decisions, and now you're going to look to people to find information, Allah will help you to find the right information that's going to guide you to the best result on the tongues of other people, or through the tongues of other people. So now your mushawara with people, your consultation with people becomes mubarak. It takes on barakah, and now because you started the right way by starting with Allah, He'll make sure you hear the right things, He'll make you meet the right people, and He'll put the right ideas in the right people's tongues so that they get to you. He'll make sure everything works out for you. Right? So in this sense then, this is the first thing we should do, is do istikhara of Allah, say astaghfirullah bi rahmatih. I seek the best from Allah through His mercy. Okay, a second tradition, also from, actually the previous one was from Kitab Man La Yahduruhu al-Faqih by Shaykh Saduq, not from Al-Kafi. There's some from Al-Kafi as well that I'll share with you in a second. A second one also from Man La Yahduruhu al-Faqih. So a person asks Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam about Istikhārah again. فَقَالَ إِسْتَخِرِ اللَّهَ فِي آخِرِ رَكْعَةٍ مِّن صَلَاةِ اللَّيْلِ. He says one of the times that's recommended to do Istikhārah of Allah is in the last rak'ah of Salatul Layl. Right? Tahajjud prayer, the 11 rak'ah that it's recommended to say at the end of the night before Fajr prayers. Right? At the end of that, the end of Watr, right? The 1 rak'ah Watr prayer, he says that's the time to do Istikhārah. وَأَنْتَ سَاجِدٌ. Right? In the sajda of the last rak'ah of Watr, then that's the time to do Istikhārah. How many times? It says مِئَةَ مَرَّةٍ وَمَرَّةٍ. 101 times say that phrase, Astaghfirullah bi rahmatih, Astaghfirullah bi rahmatih, 101 times. Okay. A third hadith, this is from Kitab al-Kafi. كان علي بن الحسين إذا هم بأمر حج أو عمرة أو بيع أو شراء أو عتق تطهر ثم صلى ركعتي الاستخارة. So the hadith says that Imam As-Sajjad, Imam Zayn al-Abidin, whatever he was thinking about doing something important, right? Whether it's, should I go for Hajj or not? Should I go for Umrah or not? Should I buy this or sell this? Or should I free this slave? Right. So nowadays you can translate that into, should I, sell this property? Should I invest in this stock? Should I, all the different big decisions that we make in our life? Should I apply to this university? Should I marry this person? All those big life decisions that we have to make. The Imam would first pray a 2-rak'ah prayer of Salatul Istikhara. Right. So a prayer to kind of prepare the way to ask Allah for the best. So you do wudu, you pray this 2 rak'ah. فَقَرَأَ فِيهِمَا بِسُورَةِ الْحَشْرِ. So this is one prescription that's quite involved, and I'll explain that. And then there's a second prescription, a second hadith that's much easier, something that we could do a lot easier. It wouldn't take so much time as this one does. So this one says 2 rak'ah, and the first one he says Fatiha and Surah Al-Hashr, and then also Surah Al-Rahman, and then قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ and قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. So quite a few surahs there in this formula of the Salatul Istikhara. He would recite these in those 2 rak'ah. وَإِذَا فَرَغَ وَهُوَ جَالِسٌ فِي دُبُرِ رَكْعَتَيْنِ ثُمَّ يَقُولُ. So and when he finished the prayer, then he would sit and he would say the following dua. So the dua itself is very beautiful. Even if you just say a simple 2 rak'ah prayer with whatever surahs, that's the next formulation that's also mentioned in another hadith, and then say this dua. It's a beautiful dua, and it's pretty easy to memorize if you think of the translation, or just memorize the translation. He would say, Allahumma in kana kada wa kada khayran li fi dini wa dunyaya wa ajili amri wa ajili fasalli ala Muhammadin wa alihi wa yassirhu li ala ahsanil wujuhi wa ajmaliha. The prayer he would say, the gist of it is, Allah, if this particular decision that I'm about to make, if this is best for me in my religious life and in my worldly life, right? Immediately and in the long term. Then, first of all, salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Your cue is
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
So first of all, send your mercy and blessings on Muhammad and his family, and make things easy for me in the best possible way. Because this is best for me, make it easy. Pave the way, open doors, and make everything happen for me in the best way. And on the flip side, then he says, "In kana kada wa kada sharran li fi dini wa dunyaya wa ajli amri wa ajli, fasalli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa wasrifhu anni." If it's not the best, if it's bad for me in my religious life, in my spiritual life, my worldly life, now and in the future, then send your blessings on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad, and turn it away from me. Put obstacles in my way, and let me know that this is the wrong thing, and just basically shut this option off for me. Right? And then he continues and he says, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad wa'zimni ala rushdi wa in karihtu dhalika aw abathu nafsi. Help me to, whatever you decide for me, let me be completely content with that. Let me set my resolve on that, to either do this thing because it's best for me, or to stay away from it because it's worse for me. But whatever it is, help me to kind of resolve to do that, even if it's not what I really like. And this is the ultimate expression of trust in Allah. Right? Sometimes we want to make a decision. I don't know. We want to buy a particular car, and we really have our heart set on it. We don't know, we don't know for sure, is this the best for me or not? This particular car, or even buying a car at this point in my life, is this the best for me or not? We kind of have our heart set on it though. Somehow, we want to do it, but we still, there's still a possibility it's not really good for us. So we've already kind of decided that we're going to do it, we want to do it, but now we're kind of doing the formality of saying, Allah, guide me to either do this or not do this. But we really want to do it. Right? So here he's saying at the end of the dua that, Allah, help me to be completely content and accept the decision to either do it or not to do it, even if it goes against what I personally desire. So I really have my heart set on it, but now, because of my dua, you're going to show me that this is not the best thing for me. I shouldn't be buying this car. I shouldn't be even thinking about buying a car right now. Whatever the decision is, help me to be content with that decision, because it's best for me, because I've turned myself over to you. And not to say, well, I'm going to ignore the signs from Allah, and I'm going to do it anyway because I wanted to do it in the first place. Right? You're ignoring the signs of Allah. You're ignoring God's guidance. It's all just a formality, and you're paying lip service to Istikhārah. But if you're truly doing istikhara, you should be willing to do whatever comes of it, even if it's not exactly what your heart desires. All right. Another hadith also mentions the same sort of a thing, the same dua and everything, but the prayer that he recommends is not as involved as the one that Imam Zayn al-Abidin just recommended, with all those different surahs. Here they just say any 2 rak'ah prayer with whatever surah you want. Easy enough, like a Fajr prayer. So do wudu, say a 2 rak'ah prayer, and then after that say this dua. If it's good for me, help me to do it. Open doors for me. If it's bad for me, close the doors for me, and just make me content with whatever the decision is. That's istikhara in a nutshell. Okay, one more tradition, actually 2 more traditions on this kind of istikhara. عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام أنه كان إذا أراد شراء العبد أو الدابة أو الحاجة الخفيفة أو الشيء اليسير استخار الله عز وجل فيه 7 مرات فإذا كان أمرا جسيما استخار الله 100 مرة. So this hadith says that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, whenever he wanted to do something kind of minor, like some minor decision was coming up, then he would do istikhara. He would say that dua, astaghfirullah bi rahmatihi 7 times. And if it was a more major decision, then he would say it 100 times. Right? So depending on the seriousness of the decision that needs to be made, he would say this dua with more fervor. Okay, and then the last hadith has another dua. It's another beautiful dua. We can skip over that. But the gist of it then is istikhara in its real sense, and it's in this sense is a kind of dua. It's something that we should be constantly doing, whether it's as involved as a whole prayer or simply saying that simple phrase astaghfirullah bi rahmatih. Some of the traditions, they recommend doing it in the sajda of your after your prayer. Right? One of the recommended acts after our wajib prayers is to do salat sajdatay shukr. To do 2 sajdas for gratitude to Allah because He gave you the tawfiq to pray. Right? That's one of the recommended acts to finish off your prayer. So in that, there's some other recommendations to say shukran lillah, to thank Allah for guiding you to the prayer. And then in the second sajda, you can say astaghfirullah bi rahmatih. I seek Allah's, I seek the best from Allah through His mercy. Why this bi rahmatih? Why not just say I seek the best from Allah and leave it up to Him? So some of the ahadith say that you should say bi rahmatih. Right? Ask for Allah to guide you to the best out of His mercy, because oftentimes it can happen that the best thing for you is actually going to be really hard on you. Sometimes the best thing, and one hadith mentions that the best thing might be that you have to lose your hand, or you lose your life, or something like that. Some huge tragedy has to occur, and that's what's best for you. But obviously that's hard to take, right? So they recommend say astaghfirullah bi rahmati or astaghfirullah fi afiyatin to kind of put a finger on the fact that I want the most merciful kind of guidance to the best solution. I don't know if I'll have the wherewithal to deal with those very hard decisions where I have to make huge self-sacrifice for that result to take place. All right. Now, istikhara in the second meaning is that istikhara that you all probably had in your mind to begin with. When all else fails, kind of turning yourself over. Like, people who are not religious, what do? They look for some change in their pocket and flip heads this, tails that. Right? So that's fine, you can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But the Prophet and the Imams have offered us a way to, instead of just making it kind of chance and saying, whatever happens, happens, to reconnect us to Allah and say, when you're in this position of really not being sure what you're supposed to do, turn back to Allah. You started out with Allah, you asked Him to guide you to the best decision, but you're at a crossroads and you don't really know which way to go. You've done all your homework, you've researched, you've consulted, you've thought about it, you've done everything you can possibly do, but you're still hayaran. Hayaran is kind of complete uncertain. You're in a state of that's a good word for hayaran. Listless and clueless, like listless and restless, and you don't know exactly what to do. So in this circumstance, instead of flipping a coin which has no value, they've given us some ways to deal with this impasse and to find a solution and choose one or the other instead of randomly by turning ourselves back over to Allah and saying, Allah, please guide me and help me to find the best. And here, I'm gonna whatever you say, I'm gonna take that path. So this is another sense of istikhara, and that's perfectly fine. We do have a hadith. I'll share some of the ahadith with you that mention this kind of a thing. And then I'll mention at the end the fatwa of Ayatul Sistani, and I think the fatwas of other maraja will be similar. If you do taqleed of some other maraja, then you can look at their fatwas as well. I'm sure on their websites they'll have, if you type in istikhara, they'll have different questions and answers about it. So one of the key things to remember is that this kind of istikhara is supposed to be a last resort and not a first resort. And that's one of the weaknesses in our community, where oftentimes, especially people who are kind of superficially religious, they think that the religious way to make a decision is as soon as something comes up, istikhara. Should I turn right or left? You either ask Siri or you do istikhara. Right? And that's not at all the way. Right? Oftentimes, proposals will come for your daughter's hand in marriage, or your son's thinking of proposing to someone, and the grandmother, the grandfather, the father, the mother, they pull out a Quran, they do istikhara first thing to see whether we should even pursue this or not. That's absolutely invalid. That's not the place for istikhara. For this second kind of istikhara. The first kind of istikhara, yes. The first kind, immediately, anything's coming up, then you seek the best from Allah. But the second kind of istikhara, where you're lost, where you're not lost yet, you haven't even tried to find the path. First try, expend your effort, do your research, talk to people, benefit from their wisdom, their experiences, then see. If something's clear, then go with it. Even then, sometimes those same kind of people, they'll do all the research, and then still at the end they'll do istikhara in that way. Even though everything's clear, it's very clear. This is a very suitable, a boy for my girl or a girl for my boy. It's a very good business deal. Everything looks very sound, and then they still do istikhara, and it comes out bad, and they throw the whole thing out the door. That's not the place for istikhara. Once you do your research and it points you one direction, go for it. The story is almost cliche, but it's worth thinking of. It's not a religious story, it's not an Islamic story, but it's a beneficial story. The guy who's stranded in a flood, and he's praying to God, saying, please save me from this flood. I'm about to die, and this rowboat comes by, and he says, no, I don't need the rowboat. I prayed to God, He's going to help me. Yeah, and then a helicopter comes by to save him. He says, no, I don't need a helicopter. God's going to save me. I prayed to Him already. And if he dies in the flood, and then he asks Allah, what happened? I prayed to you. I was waiting for you to help me. Allah said, I sent you a rowboat. I sent you a helicopter. You didn't avail yourself of the things that I gave you. Right? So we shouldn't expect that Allah works. The hadith says, "Aballahu an yujri al-umur illa bil asbab." Allah doesn't work miraculously in that sense that we think that the answers to prayer should happen as miracles, out of extraordinary events. He answers our prayers, definitely. He answers every prayer. "Ud'uni astajib lakum." Pray to me, I'll definitely answer you. It's a guarantee. But the way He answers them, the way He makes things happen, is through natural means. It's really miraculous if you think about it, how things happen, but it's miraculous through natural means. Right? I think of how many close calls you've had in your life where you really should be dead. Near misses in car accidents, near misses and almost being hit by a car, all different things. Think of your kids. Those of you who have toddlers, I have a toddler at home as well. Just think how many times they should have been hurt really bad, or if not worse. Right? But they're saved. For the most part, alhamdulillah, they're saved. So what's that that's making that happen? That prevents so many bad things that should happen from happening. It's the protection of Allah. In miraculous ways that we don't understand, but it happens in normal ways. The Quran tells us that we have these hafadha, these angels, guardian angels. The concept of guardian angels that Hollywood sometimes exploits. It's an Islamic concept as well. We have guardian angels who are appointed to each of us to protect us from those deaths that are not meant for us. Imam Ali has a very beautiful phrase in Nahj al-Balagha where he says that we are basically walking targets for death. Death is just sitting there shooting arrows, a car accident, a disease, all these different things that could potentially kill us. Right? It doesn't take much to kill a human being for us to die. Another place in Nahj al-Balagha he says, he admits that we're so delicate. Just imagine, the same sip that is sustenance for you, it goes down the wrong pipe and you're dead. The same morsel, it's a simple morsel that you need for sustenance, it goes down the wrong pipe, you choke and you're dead. Right? Someone knocks you the wrong way, you fall the wrong way, you hit your head the wrong way. It's very easy. Our life is very, very delicate. So we're walking targets for death, he says, and those arrows that are constantly being shot at us, those incoming arrows, these guardian angels are there to protect us. As long as it's not yet our time, as long as Allah has decided that we're supposed to keep on living, our guardian angels protect us from all those near misses. Those are the near misses we feel in our lives. Then finally, when it's my time, then the guardian angels stand back, and the next incoming missile hits me and I'm out. Whatever it might be. Okay, so I got a little too far off the subject. Alright, so we're talking about Istikhārah, and we're talking about making these decisions. So the time to make these decisions using this second kind of Istikhārah, where I'll explain kind of some of the ways that we traditionally do it, is that last resort when nothing else has given you anything to go on, you still are really 50-50 either way. That's what hayran is. When you're hayran and you're 50-50, you don't know which way to go, that's when you can do it. Alright, so let me share a couple of hadith with you about this. These ahadith, they speak about the different ways that you can do it. And then we'll see Sayyid Sistani's fatwa at the end. He doesn't put much stock in these ahadith, right? He doesn't see that these ahadith are very, very strong. So he says we can do it like this, biraja al-matlubiyya, which is a key word for saying, in hopes that this is right. It's nothing wrong, definitely. But in hopes that it's something good and something Allah wants us to do, we can make our decisions in this way. Instead of flipping a coin, which has no benefit, we can flip open the Quran, or we can use a subha, or use these lots and draw lots to make our decisions in those instances. So one hadith from Al-Kafi says, إذا أردت أمرا فخذ ست رقاع فاكتب في ثلاث منها بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم خيرة من الله العزيز الحكيم لفلان ابن فلانة افعله. So he says, take 6 pieces of paper, or we use paper, he says fabric. So 6 pieces of paper, all the same size, and on each one write Bismillah, and say that I'm looking for this. Bismillah, this is a decision from Allah, do it. And the second one also, do it. Third one, do it. And then the other 3, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. So you have 3 saying go for it, and 3 saying don't go for it. And then he gives a way to choose these. You put them into some container, and then you draw them out. And if all 3 are good, then you go for it. All 3 are bad, you don't go for it. And then if it's a mixed bag, then you keep on drawing. You draw 5, and then you see which one is favored, which one has 3, which one has 2. And the one that wins the majority, you go for that. So it's basically another way of flipping a coin. You're drawing lots in this case to try to make a decision. But they've connected us again with Allah by at least reminding us that we're seeking the best from Allah, not simply flipping a coin which has no religious benefit. Yeah? This is another hadith from Wasa'id al-Shi'a. A person says, قلت لأبي عبد الله عليه السلام أريد الشيء وأستخير الله فيه فلا يوفق فيه الرأي. So he says that I followed your advice. I wanted to do something. I wasn't sure what to do, so I did Istikhara in the first sense. I asked Allah for the best, but I didn't come to any conclusion. Right, so I've done all my homework, but I still didn't reach a conclusion. So now what do I do? قال افتتح المصحف فانظر إلى أول ما ترى فخذ به إن شاء الله. So he says, open up the Mus'haf, open up the Quran, and look at the first verse you see, and take that as your guidance. So the way our scholars have understood this is to look at that first verse on the right side of the right page. So you just flip it open randomly, look at the first verse on the right page, and if it's a positive verse, meaning a verse that's talking about Jannah and good actions and good deeds and profits and these kinds of things, then that's a yes. And if it's about hellfire and warnings and these kinds of things, then it's a no. So there's nothing. So keep that in mind. Oftentimes, when people see this and they think about this, they think, "Aha, this is a way of fortune telling. Somehow we can tell the future with these verses." That's not the case. Another hadith says this. It's very simple. It says, "La tatafa'al bil Quran." Right? Don't try to tell the future through the Quran. And so you put these two together. Even Hurr al-Amali, the author of this, the compiler of these particular traditions, he says that the difference between the two is that don't think that you can tell the future. So when you flip open that verse and you see the first verse and it says it's good, it's not telling you that, it's not telling you the future. You might have a very hard road ahead. Maybe it'll end in a way that's very bitter. You don't think Imam Hussein did Istikhara, and from a worldly perspective, he had the worst end possible. Right? So it's not always going to be a happy ending if you do Istikhara, but it'll be the best thing for you. Right? The best thing for you sometimes is bitter, sometimes it's hard to swallow. Right? So we shouldn't think that this is somehow a way of telling the future. It's simply a way of making a decision where there's no other decision to be made because we have no other resources at our disposal. That's just the last resort that we use. Right, let me read a couple of Sayyid Sistani's fatwas. So one of the questions was asked, what do you think about Istikhara? What's your opinion about Istikhara? He says, "Al-mutayaqqan min mashru'iyyat al-istikhara huwa mawlid al-tahayyur ba'd al-istishara." He says, where you can resort to this Istikhara, meaning flipping open the Quran and these kinds of things, is after you've done all your istishara, mushawara, mashwara, you've done all your consultation, you've done your research, and then you're still in that position of tahayyur and you don't know what to do, that's the only time that you can do this istikhara and use the Quran to make a decision. Another question is asked is, هل الاستخارة بالطريقة المتبعة عندنا الآن محبذة شرعا أو واردة? Is it a good thing to do istikhara, making a decision like this? Is it something that we have a hadith for? So his answer is يؤتى بها رجاء. So that's his code word for saying, I don't have confidence in a hadith about this. So the same hadith I just read to you, they fit, there's nothing wrong with them, but for him to pass a fatwa and give an opinion based on these things, he has to feel confident that, for instance, all the narrators are strong, that this hadith, there's a high likelihood that this hadith is actually spoken by the Prophet or the Imams, and he doesn't have that kind of confidence. So he said you can do it, but do it kind of with the hope that inshallah it's something good to do. Not because it is definitely something good to do. So there's a little bit of precaution there in his wording as well. You can do it عند الحيرة, when you are in that position of total uncertainty. وعدم ترجح أحد الاحتمالات بعد التأمل والاستشارة. After you've done your own due diligence, you've done all your consultation, if you're still in that position, then only you can do this. Then someone asked, can you do it multiple times? Sometimes, remember I said, sometimes people already know what they want to do. They already know they want to marry this person, buy this house, whatever it is. They already know that, but then they do the istikhara just because that's what they were taught. They do it, and then it comes out no. But I want to do it. Let me try it again. Maybe I didn't flip it open the right way. And we're playing games with this. Right? So he says no. There's absolutely no justification for repeating it unless circumstances have changed. Now circumstances have changed, and he mentions even bis-sadaqa, bit-tasadduq. So we talked about bada earlier, a few days ago. Bada was that way that we can change the destiny that Allah has determined for us. He's given us the power through something like sadaqah or some other actions to change what has been written for us. So, today, for instance, when I did the istikhara and it came out good, or sorry, it came out, say, bad, maybe it was because there was some sort of bad in it, but now I give sadaqah with the intention that I'm trying to lift off some bad thing that's been ordained for me. And now he says, because you've done sadaqah, the circumstances have now changed. Now you can do istikhara again and see if it comes out differently. Not because you're playing games and you already know the answer, but because you're really trying to end up with the best. So you give sadaqah because you know that's one of the ways that you can affect your own fate and change your fate. Another question says, how do you do istikhara? What's the way? What's the technique for doing it? So his answer is, Istikhara is talabul khayr min Allah ta'ala, wa hiya du'a'un فَرُبَّمَا يُسْتَجَابُ وَرُبَّمَا لَا يُسْتَجَابُ. He says that istikhara, he mentions the first meaning first. He says istikhara, first of all, means that dua, that supplication that you make to Allah to seek the best. So he mentions the first meaning of istikhara first. And then he says the other way that's done to make that decision as a last resort, لَيْسَ لَهَا طَرِيقَةٌ خَاصَّةٌ وَعَرَدَةٌ فِي الشَّرْعِ. He says that we don't have any specific way that I can trust, because he doesn't rely on these different ahadith that have been narrated. So he says there's no way I can say this is the way to do it. This is the way the imams would do it or the Prophet would do it. But he says the way that the scholars do it, like in the culture of scholars, the way that has become kind of customary to do it is like this. So he mentions that you make a dua to Allah to guide me to the best, and then you open up the Quran randomly. You look at the right page, the top verse of the right page, and you see is it a positive verse or a negative verse, and then that's your answer, yes or no, for that particular thing. And he makes a special emphasis, says that this is not fortune telling. The verse doesn't somehow tell you what's going to happen or something about the future. It's simply your yes or no answer. Instead of flipping a coin, you're opening a verse of the Quran, so you have one little connection to the Quran and to Allah in this decision-making process. And the last question he asks, he says, somebody asks him, هل يجب على المستخير الالتزام بالاستخارة? Once I do istikhara, is it wajib on me to follow through with the answer? He says no, it's not wajib. But he says you should go with the answer. Right? So he gives a recommendation, you should go with it, and you can think psychologically, you'll psych yourself out. If you do the istikhara, it says no, and you say, oh, I'm not going to, I want to do it anyway. You'll do it, and inevitably you'll have challenges, and you'll say, oh, I wish I should have gone with that. You'll second guess yourself, and you'll be a mess, and always think that you made the wrong decision because you went against this thing. It's disrespectful, first of all, because you asked Allah to help you, and now He helped you and you went against Him. Right? And then you'll never be at ease. No matter what happens, you'll always feel like you made the wrong decision, and you'll blame it on yourself and these kinds of things. So if you're going to turn to istikhara, first of all, be careful. Make sure you don't turn to that second meaning of istikhara until it's really the time for it. And once you do turn to it, then follow through. Show that much respect to Allah that you're willing to follow through on whatever He tells you. Alright. So as a closing note, just two things to recap. One is that istikhara in that first sense should be a constant facet of our life that we're always doing. In the second sense, last resort. Just to give you a sense of it, I probably have resorted to that second kind of istikhara maybe twice in my life. Right? That's about right. It should be a very rare sort of occurrence, not an everyday kind of a thing. The first thing, you flip out your Quran and make these things. Right? The second thing is that don't think that doing istikhara in the second sense is somehow showing greater trust in Allah, that we're somehow doing something that is more favorable. In fact, if you rely on your intellect that Allah has given you, if you rely on consultation that Allah and the Prophet and the Imams have guided us towards and emphasized that we should do mashwara and consult with the right kinds of people, if you do those kinds of things and then come up with a preference for one choice over the other, and then go with it, rely on that, that really shows reliance on Allah. That shows that you trust that Allah, the means that Allah has laid out for us, the guidance that He's given us for making decisions, I trust in that. I trust in my faculty and my intellect because it's a gift from Allah that He's given me. I trust in the consultation and in the counsel that's offered by people who are God-fearing and experienced. And I believe that that's the best way to make a decision because Allah has guided me to that. That's the godly decision. That's the decision that's going to be blessed and that's going to show that I rely on Allah. If I say, my intellect points in this direction, all the counsel points in this direction, but I do istikhara for no reason and it points me in another direction, I'm going to go with that. What we're really saying is, I don't trust all these faculties and gifts that Allah has given me. and I'm going to basically turn off my mind, turn off all my common sense, and go with some other answer that makes absolutely no sense. Right? That's not faithfulness. That's not showing iman and tawakkul and these kinds of qualities in us. Right? So I think that's an important thing to think of, because I think people, oftentimes we see people who are kind of superficially religious. I make a point of that, superficially religious. Oftentimes you have people who are superficially religious, who aren't really, they don't have much knowledge, and they don't use their intellect the way they're supposed to. But they, for instance, they pray a lot. They read Quran a lot. They read du'as a lot. Right? We need to separate those two. This book that I mentioned, Kitab, the first book of the Intellect and Foolishness, there are several ahadith that talk about situations like that. There's one where there's a person praises this neighbor of his, or someone he knows. He says, this person, mashallah, is such a great person. Really, really great. He's always praying, always fasting, always worshipping Allah. The Imam says, I have one question for you. How is his intellect? The guy says, oh, come to think of it, he doesn't really have an intellect. He doesn't really think too much. He's not really someone to think. The Imam says, then whatever acts of worship he does, it won't benefit him at all. It's useless. It's just a habit, just something you kind of do just because that's the, and you just do it. A person who has intellect will make strong choices. He might end up praying less. I'm not talking about wajib prayers versus wajib prayers, of course, have to be done. But mustahab prayers, for instance, right? Just because someone spends hours a day praying doesn't mean he's a better person necessarily. What kind of decision led him to that? Was it that he had free time, he'd fulfilled all of his obligations, and now in his free time he wants to spend extra time worshiping Allah? That's good. That's beneficial. Or is it that he's like, I'm gonna pray. I'm gonna stay up all night praying, and then it's okay if I go to work 2 hours late. It's okay if I'm yawning all day and I can't fulfill my obligations to my family or to work and stuff, and I'm staying up all night praying. MashaAllah, I'm doing something so good. And that's a foolish kind of reason to pray. You have no excuse for shirking responsibility for the sake of mustahab acts of worship and these kinds of things. Right? So one of the phrases that we get in Al-Kafi, the Imam says that the iftar of someone who has a strong intellect is more valuable than the fasting of someone who's a fool. Right? Or the travels that, or staying at home, if that's done by someone with an intellect, has more value than going off for a jihad and for all these different things if you're a fool. So the criteria is intellect versus foolishness. In that sense, not just smarts and IQ, right? In terms of really evaluating things, seeing what's most beneficial and how can I avoid the most harm. That's really the bottom line. In reality, like not just worldly in a worldly sense, but in reality, how can I get the most benefit? How can I avoid the most harm? That's really the evaluation, the litmus test that shows if someone has a strong intellect or a weak intellect. Right? So a person might decide that the best thing for me to do right now is not to fast. It's mustahab to fast today, for instance, or it's always mustahab to fast on every day except for Eid and Ashura. Right? So it's mustahab to fast, but if I fast, I know I'm not going to be able to be strong at work today. I know, whatever, I can't fulfill my obligations and be top-notch if I fast, so I'm going to choose not to fast because I have responsibilities today. That's a very sound decision. The other person, a fool, would say, oh, it's mustahab to fast today, I'm going to fast, and then all day he's yawning, all day he's tired, he can't even fulfill his obligations, and he fails on so many levels, and his excuse is, oh, I'm fasting because of mustahab today. That's a foolish decision, that's a useless decision, and that he'll get no reward, or it might even be punishment for it because he failed where it was wajib, and he did something that's mustahab. You can't get reward for extra credit when you haven't done your obligations. Okay, recite wa sallallahu alayhi wa sallam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
A few minutes for any questions, clarifications on today's lecture. Yes, sister.
You just said the best way is to rely on your intellect and knowledge what you have. But then you also said that Hazrat Imam Jawad would also use Istikhārah. Can you just a little bit clarify that?
So istikhara in that first sense, she's saying, is there a conflict between saying I should rely on my intellect, my consultation and stuff, and then the Imam says, do istikhara? There's no conflict. Think of the istikhara in the two senses. The first sense was the first thing you do, before you even rely on your intellect, before you do any consultation with people, you seek the best from Allah. Say, Allah, astaghfirullah bi rahmatih, Allah guide me to the best decision.